this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Curtain, and let's go on an adventure.
In this week's episode, I spoke to Kiran Shah, who lives in the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, Australia. After we stopped recording, Kiran spoke about trusting the story, and that was something that unfortunately we didn't get recorded, but it was really great advice to me as a beginner storyteller to trust the story. And we had a really interesting conversation, and Kiran's done lots of work overseas and is particularly a strong teller of Asian stories. I hope you enjoy the interview. Well, welcome to this week's episode. This week we're talking to Blue Mountains storyteller, Kiran Shah. Hi, Kiran.
Hi, Elisa.
Tell me, how did you get into story?
Well, I was in Singapore. That was where I was born and raised. And I've been a social worker and an early childhood educator. And one day I heard that the Book Council of Singapore was having some storytellers. So, very intrigued, and I went to listen. And I have always been reading to children, never knew there was somebody who could make a living out of just telling. So the first storyteller was Beulah Kandapa, and she just told, she was very mysterious. But the second storyteller that the Book Council invited the next year, she grabbed my attention, and that was Kathy Spagnoli, who unfortunately passed away a couple of months ago. And she was so riveting. And then I thought, I want to learn how to do that. I'm sure I can. And I got another friend, and I said, we have to bring her back and have a storytelling course under her. And we did just that in 1998. When we first listened to her, we got her back in 1999. And she was part of a storytelling course that I helped the Book Council to organize, all for my own benefit, really. And it was so successful that we had her back for 5 years in a row. And apart from her speciality, which was folktales from Asia and storytelling styles and storytelling techniques, Kathy was Irish, German, American, but married to an Indian artist and living in India. So she knew a lot more than I did of my own heritage, which I thought was terrible. And I have to credit her for my interest in storytelling. And alongside the course that she did for us, we also had invited people, who could do voice and drama and literature. So it was quite a nice course that lasted for a few years, and eventually I even taught part of that course together with my co-partner, business partner, Sheila Wee. And then we said, well, we must start a storytelling company. So that all happened in towards the end of 1999. And Singapore's first storytelling company was born to revive the lost art of oral telling. Yeah, it had been there, but we wanted to revive it. And yes, it was wonderful, and we were the pioneers, and we just took it from there, and it was a fantastic learning journey. We organized conferences so that we could invite professional storytellers from around the world to develop ourselves, and it's been a wonderful journey that has continued since I moved to Australia in 2008. It's been wonderful, and I always tell my audiences I have the best job in the world as a storyteller. And my husband, he says, I can't believe you're telling stories and getting paid for it. When I was young, I would tell stories and get whacked for it.
I had the same moment though, Kieran. I didn't realize that you could get paid to just tell stories,
Yeah.
and for me, being inside the story is all I've ever wanted to do. So to be able to be
Hmm.
paid to be do that is just an extraordinary thing. So
I think so.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
It
what?
doesn't pay very much. I mean, but the joy,
Yeah.
the pleasure, the giving and receiving when you tell a story and then somebody comes up and remembers you a year later. You came to my school last year, miss. It was like, wow.
And
Yeah.
so what brought you to Australia to move? What made that happen? And then what did you find with storytelling
Oh,
here?
that's a love story. So I met my now husband many, many years ago in Singapore, but our lives took different paths as he migrated to Australia and I went around getting around the world working. But we wrote letters the old-fashioned way. This is way before emails. So, but we finally met after 16 years.
Wow.
And then email started and we connected for a couple more years and then we got married. And so I moved to Australia because this is his home.
Oh, wonderful. And what did you find with storytelling here in Australia? Did you find that there was much here?
For me, the vastness of Australia meant I felt very isolated when I first came. I did join the guild within the first week of my arrival. There was actually an event. So I did go to that. And I had already known a couple of other storytellers. Christine Greeno and John Hockney had come to Singapore. So I knew them. And John lives in the mountains. So that was nice. But the distances, you see, in Singapore being so tiny, that if I wanted to practice a story, I'd walk over to somebody's place and say, "Hey, I need you to listen to my story." This is before Zoom and all, yeah, of course. And here, in 2008, I remember, apart from the guild, I had no other storyteller friends, and I think that was a bit hard. But we did have Skype in those days, and I was still quite connected, and I was still making trips back to Singapore to see my mum 3 times a year. So it wasn't that bad. But in terms of storytelling, it was quite isolating.
Mm,
And I think sometimes it still can be for many storytellers who are not in the big cities,
mm,
or like you in Perth,
mm.
it can be very isolating. But I guess we have to thank COVID for bringing the international storytelling community together.
Yeah,
That's been one big plus, I would say. And also staying in touch with storytellers from around the world through conferences. One of the biggest organizations that I've been very closely affiliated to is FEAST, the Federation of Asian Storytellers, and that's been really good. Yeah, and even for you, as you went through the mentorship program,
yeah,
Elisa.
yeah. No, it's been incredible to link into those networks. And like you said, in Perth, it's quite a small community,
Yes.
and but it's growing, so that's really positive, I think. And it comes back to we sort of fall. What I'm finding with the interviews is people sort of fall into it. They go, "What?
Mhm.
There's this thing, and how did why
Mhm.
why didn't I know about this before?"
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that's a feature of the times that we're living in, that people are rediscovering story, or whether it's a way that we can remember our humanity in a time where we seem to not have lost our direction.
I think storytelling is even more relevant now than it used to be, um, because stories speak to the heart. And I think that is so powerful. Um, and in this, I should say, modern world where people are rushing about, um, we need to stop and reflect. And I think stories allow us to do that, that moment that we're in the story. I think it's very powerful,
Yeah.
can be very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. So you've said you've done a lot of traveling with your storytelling. Can you talk us through some of those experiences of where you've been and what you've done?
Oh gosh, we started. I think I started firstly with storytelling, going to Southeast Asia, so Thailand, Malaysia, and then India came along, and then it just kind of spread. So I've been to Iran for their storytelling festival, also to Indonesia a couple of times, and most recently last month for the Feast Conference, and also for the Ayo Dongeng Indonesia, the Indonesian Storytelling Association's pre-festival. So there are heaps and heaps of opportunities. And I think Australia being closer to Asia, I think that's where we need to, connect more.
Mm.
And for me, being a Singaporean, the connection is already there. But I think having more Australians being connected, it's happening. So I'm very pleased about my little part in that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And so, one of the things I've found doing a bit of research on stories is a lot of the stories have origins in Asia or are influenced from Asian
Mm-hmm.
elements.
Very hard to
Yeah,
tell because
yeah,
stories travel, don't they?
they
And they
do.
travel with the trade routes. They travel. So Cinderella is a really good example, as you know, because you've done so much research. And I've always told my friends that, hello, yes, yes, Marco Polo may have brought Cinderella back to Italy, but and even like my understanding of the first ghost story that was written down, it's from China. So again, I think stories travel, yeah, but that's not to say that they didn't also originate from whatever lands. So it's both. One of the things I've been a little bit intrigued about, but never really followed through, is the Romani people, the Gypsies. My understanding, what I've been told, is that they actually originated from India and made their way, to Europe, because there are some words in the languages that fit some of the Indian languages. So that's been an interesting. So again, yeah, they could they could have traveled
Yeah.
from Asia, from all these ancient civilizations, and also they could have also, and then they get intermingled, and then people make the stories their own, like we do even
Yeah.
now. we
Yeah.
we take a story, we read a story, and then we make it our own because we want to reflect our own life experiences as well.
And so, what stories do you choose to tell? What are your, favorite?
I'm particularly fond of folk tales. The Asian in me is a bit reticent about telling personal tales, but I have started to do so because sometimes you need to challenge yourself. I'm very comfortable with folk tales. I'm very comfortable with folk tales around the world, but I realize that what calls to me are the Asian folk tales.
Yeah.
I like listening to, Scottish tales and the myths from Europe, but they don't call to me in the same way, so I tend not to tell them. So Asian folk tales are ones that I really, really that call to me. I've started dabbling in personal stories a little bit because I realize it is a way to share my culture to a non-Asian audience.
Mm.
So I have started doing that with a couple of other organizations like Generation Women, the Story Room that's based here in Sydney.
And so, is it all of Asia or just a specific area that you focus on? What's your?
Oh, all of Asia. I'm comfortable because being in Singapore, I have Chinese friends, and I have no qualms telling stories from China, from India, which is my heritage, and
Yeah,
Southeast Asia as well.
yeah,
They just I relate to them very well, so yeah, they
yeah.
call to me.
Tell me about that. They call to you.
You know, you read 100 stories, and then there's that one or two that say, okay, that's the one I want to pick to learn how to tell. And that's yeah. And sometimes you go back to books that you haven't in a long time and said, oh, how did I miss that? But that's because you've moved on in life and different experiences, so then different stories call to you at different times in your life.
Yeah, wow. I really like that. I think I can relate to that feeling of being called
Mm,
to with a story. Um,
yeah.
do you have a favorite that you like telling?
Oh, I have so many favorites, so this has to be a current favorite.
A current favorite then?
A current favorite. And it's a very short one, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oh, I'll give you a little bit of background because I think that's important. Um, when my first storytelling teacher and mentor, Kathy Spagnoli, passed away in in October, I decided that I would reread her books. And one that I picked up, in fact, I have two right here by my bedside because I'm still rereading them. And I'll just show this to you. I know you can't. It's called Jasmine and Coconuts. They're South Indian tales because Kathy was married to a South Indian artist, and he did the illustrations for this book. So I'll tell you a very short story. Um, there was a South Indian philosopher called Thiruvalluvar, and if you look him up, he's quite famous. He writes couplets that have very deep meaning. And this is a story of Thiruvalluvar when he was tending to his very, very sick wife. And she knew she had not long to live. And so she asked him, as he sat by her side and held her hand and soothed her brow, she asked him, I've always wondered one thing. And can you answer this? And he goes, of course, what is it? From the day that we were married, and I would cook a meal for you and put it on the banana leaf, you always ask for a little bowl of water to be placed by the side. And I noticed you had a little stick right by the side of that bowl. And every day I would put the rice and all the different dishes on the banana leaf. And every day, without fail, that bowl with that little bit of water in it was untouched. This has been going on for all our married life. Tell me, what was that bowl for? And why did you never use it? Well, Tiruvellava replied. He said, I had that bowl of water just in case that if any of the rice spilled out of that banana leaf, I would pick it up and wash that rice. And with that stick, I would then make sure that it was clean, and then I would eat that rice, that grain of rice. But you were so gentle and so careful when you put that rice on the banana leaf that never a single grain dropped out of that leaf. So I never had to use that bowl of water. And his wife, hearing that answer, smiled a very satisfied smile. And this story was written by Kathy because when she and her husband then moved back to the United States after all those years in India, her husband would tell her this story because he just couldn't take the amount of waste that he saw in America.
Mm, wow. It's a very strong environmental message, really, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I had read that story years and years ago, but suddenly this one just called to me and I said, I have to share this.
Yeah, wonderful. So do you think that the stories you tell have themes, or is it different themes based on where you are in life?
Uh, oh, every story, has a theme. And sometimes when I get a gig, and they said, we want you to focus on this theme. And I will always look to my own repertoire and see, well, how can this story be fitted, into that theme? And most stories have a whole lot of themes. It's what you want to focus on for your audience.
Mm. So tell me about your preparation process. Are you thinking about the audience a lot when you prepare?
Absolutely, because I have a wide range of ages that I cater to. So if I, well, my last gig was a Christmas thing for little ones. They were 2 to 5 year olds. So um, so I had stories about I did a little rhyme about Christmas trees that the children could join in and participate. I had little stick puppets of trees, and yes, basically it would very much be based on the audience. A lot, if there are adult audiences, then it would be again quite different. The audience that I find, I think the most challenging are the teenagers. They're kind of hard to please. So have the very first time I had a teenage audience, that was quite daunting. But I chose to tell, kind of um, stories where there are dilemmas, and I think that kind of appeals.
Mm.
Or there's some clever, witty, kind of character. So those kind of stories, or stories of justice, I think that kind of appeals. So yes, a lot of the stories will be based on the audience. Yeah.
Do you have some really memorable moments that you would like to share when you're telling?
I think it's when I've walked into, um, you do a school gig. This is in Singapore. You do a school gig, and then you need to go to the loo. So you go to the loo, and these girls come in and like, oh my God, it's the storyteller. You feel like a rock star. Uh, but I do remember going back to a school quite regularly and being recognized. And a year later, that child could tell me the story that I had told to her, which
Oh,
I had forgotten. I was like, oh my goodness. So it's amazing what people retain,
it is.
something that has meant uh, you know, it has meant something to you. And that's an amazing feeling.
And why do
Ah,
you, in going back to the talking about the heart, why do you think that is? Why do you think the stories resonate so deeply?
because your emotions are at play, and that's something um, that I think we don't uh, realize. And because for many people storytelling is very wishy-washy, it's like yeah, you hear a story and you feel good or whatever, but there is a lot of science to storytelling as well, and there's been a lot of research, especially in the US, on the science behind storytelling and what it does to the brain. Um, and um, and and that's something that I think we can't ignore, that it
Tell me
does
more about that.
fire up, it fires up the neurons and the synapses. And um, and there has been research, uh, a lot of research done by somebody called Kendall Haven, and he's worked quite a bit with NASA and the American Defense. I forget the name, the defense agency, um, and they wire up people, and they check on their responses according to, in different parts of the story, and they found quite amazing stuff. um, he's written a book on some, I think, the
Mhm.
science of, oh, I can't remember the title
Oh,
offhand.
I'll be Googling it when we get off there.
um,
As an educator, I one of my most memorable experiences was telling Red Riding Hood, and the next day a girl came back and she had rewritten it herself. And this was a girl who hated reading, hated talking, hated writing,
yeah,
and she had that story had touched something in her, and which was quite incredible.
it's very powerful. It's very
Yeah,
powerful. I think there's no doubt. It's just we need to let more people be aware of this. That's all.
yeah, amazing. And so,
Mm.
do you have some advice for emerging tellers like myself?
Just tell. And I'm going to quote Margaret uh, Reed McDonald here, another one of my mentors. It's tell it some more, tell it again, and tell it some more. In other words, just keep telling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
And it will be different every time. Have a good time. Enjoy. And if you love a story, that will come out. Your enthusiasm for the story, will come out.
Brilliant. And so, so this podcast is called The Heart of Storytelling. What do you think is at the heart of storytelling?
The connection, the storyteller, the story, and the listener.
It's amazing how often that comes up, that triangulation. It's it
Mm,
it comes up
mm,
a lot, I think.
yeah.
Connection. That's pretty powerful. So have you found that in some of your apart from, you've said that there were a couple of occasions where you've had that child come back after a year. Do you
Mm.
think that connection is something that is a feature of your style of telling? Do you think that that's part of you as a person as well?
Oh gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. I thought it was the story that reached out, you know. Um, don't know. Don't know.
That's something to contemplate, perhaps.
Yes, perhaps, yes. I'm just happy that, I'm on this journey because it's still a journey. I'm still learning. And I have so much support, friends from all around the world, and also here in Australia, that we continue to share stories. The Blue Mountains has a story circle that we run under the guild, and we meet regularly. The New South Wales, uh, you know, storytelling guild is very, very active. So we have swaps there's a swap once a month. There's another group that meets on Tuesdays. Our story circle, the Blue Mountains one, meets on a Sunday afternoon once a month. So there's lots going on
Mm,
online, and
mm,
coming up in person as well now, maybe more this year than the past couple of years. Yeah. And of course, we had the International Storytelling Festival in June in Sydney. So that was incredible. Yeah.
mm. Or just on the online thing, do you think storytelling's changing through the medium of the visual, through the technology?
Ah, well, there is a difference. I mean, there's no doubt about that. When you're telling a story, boxed in the little rectangle, um, and there is a lot of difference when you're connecting with a real audience. But look, Zoom has enabled us to reach out to so many people. I'm listening to more people than I ever did, um, or could possibly do, and so it has its place.
Yeah. And,
And I
and
think it will continue to have its place. Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's about that connection though, isn't it? The instead of being in this small community that
Yes.
we're in, it broadened our
Yeah.
reach, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
do you think that there's, in terms of the art of telling in the box, are there skills that you think are specific to the box that are different from in person?
Yes, because of the restrictions of the box, you have to be very careful if you're the type that uses a lot of gestures that you keep them contained within within that frame that you have. So yes, that's quite the gesturing part, I think, makes a big difference, and how you use the screen effectively as well.
Mm,
Some people do it more better than others, and
mm.
some people have worked on it a little bit more than others. If you want to come closer, you zoom in and out. How you
Yeah.
move back and move forward. These are things, and with using of props, because I have been on an online festival and using props. Oh my goodness, the amount of rehearsal. Like, do you put the props on the left, on the right, because your hands are going to move, and how do you want to make it seem seamless? So using props on Zoom requires a lot more practice,
Yeah.
as to where you place them so
Yeah.
that it comes out really effortless and seamless, and your hands are not all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Mm.
not losing it in the background and
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I don't imagine the voice would have to be much different. I did notice in the mentorship, my eyes had to look at the camera, and
Yes,
that was a
yes,
real challenge to keep the
yes,
gaze at the camera rather
yes,
than at
yes,
looking at the
yes,
audience, because you naturally
yes,
want to see the responses. So I
yes.
found that very
Yep.
challenging. Yeah.
Mm.
So what do you think is the future of storytelling? Do you think it's a bright future?
Well, we all play our parts. Yeah. Uh, I don't. As long as we breathe, stories will always be told.
Yeah, beautiful. What a lovely way to end our interview today. Thank you so much, Kiran, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairy tale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling, and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alissacurtain.com or at Alissa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.